every time I say that we're going to Texas, there's like a, someone I'm talking to, not part of Bread and Puppet, just someone I'm talking to who's like, oh man, I wonder how they'll take your politics. And part of me is like, I don't know, like there are so many people in Texas. Like there's got to be like also so many beautiful organizers in Texas doing really hard work. Like I don't want to assume anything. I've never been myself, but like I don't know. Why wouldn't we want to perform in Texas? Also, I don't always want to perform or work with people who already agree with me. That would be incredibly boring and kind of depressing. Like, and maybe not the point.
Breaking news. Welcome to the Martian Radio Show. My name is Charlotte Reynolds Karajanis, and today I am honored to be joined by part human, part puppet, full artist with so much to say and so much to do from the Bread and Puppet Theater. Today we are joined by May Hathaway, who will be with us to talk about Bread and Puppet, to talk about the intersection of art and the politic, and ever so much more. Excited for a dynamic interview. Welcome to the show, May.
Thank you, Charlotte. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, heck yeah. So if we may kick it right off, would you tell us a bit about Bread and Puppet Theater for anyone who is new to the scene?
Absolutely, it would be my honor. Bread and Puppet, it's a political theater. It's a political puppet theater. It was founded in 1963 by Peter and Elke Schumann, Elke being the matriarch and one of the hearts of Bread and Puppet, who passed away in 2021. And Peter is still our riotous and wonderful and whimsical director. It was created in New York City's Lower East Side. It started with rod puppets and hand puppets and working with garbage and working with local kids in the street and local community members. And it talked about things like rent strikes and the rats and police and other problems that face their neighborhood. And it was a pretty powerful little group that turned into something enormous during the Vietnam War era. And then they moved up to Glover, Vermont in 1974. And that's where I am sitting right now. And a lot of our work centers around cheap art as like the main motif and central belief. So the belief that art should be like food. It should be something that everyone has access to. It should be something that we share and to break bread with each other. And the understanding that you tell stories as you eat together and as you're nourished together. And that art should be cheap and it should be for everyone. It should be like clouds. It should be like blue sky. It should be like green grass, which is things that Peter has put in his different prints. And so a lot of what we make is out of garbage, and garbage is just about the most sacred thing ever here. So that's Bread and Puppet. It's pretty delightful.
Amazing. And while we're already there, would you talk a bit more about the use of garbage and found materials in the work of Bread and Puppet? Maybe a bit about some special memories you have, favorite trash you've ever worked with, and the printmaking that you mentioned as well. I would love to hear a bit more about how that's incorporated into the work.
Absolutely. I really, it's funny, I love material. I'm someone who's really textural and moved by textures that have age and that have already have a story. And some of which you have to like clean and treat yourself because they're found on the side of the road. And that kind of stuff is valued very highly here. And I love the feeling of being on tour in the Bread and Puppet circus bus, and you stop at a gas station and you see a fellow with a huge box of cardboard going out to the recycling bin, and everyone cheers, and we run after this man and we say, "Please, sir, can we have your cardboard?" And he looks so confused. And that's really like, that's just the best feeling, because to us it's like gold. It's like, think of all the puppets you can make. It's like so fast, these beautiful wings that we can make for 40 people with just this cardboard, and then we can take to the street and we can do a presentation of Birds for Peace or something or anything just with this garbage that this guy was throwing out. And that feeling of excitement that we all kind of like have this kinship with each other, that we see the potential for where it can go. So yeah, I guess cardboard is pretty special. discarded fabric and discarded bed sheets are Peter's gold right now. He works on bed sheets from old hotels, from old hospitals, from, you know, from even just like boarding schools, anything that they're giving away or that is a little old and we can use. He turns them into these beautiful, large scale, often devastating paintings. And those have been really inspiring to me as well. So yeah, that's some of that stuff. And it's really fun to work with because also you don't have to feel too precious with it. You can feel experimental and playful. And it's like a lot of the theater is kind of anti-theater and anti-art in a way, where Peter can feel very rebellious about the way something is supposed to be done. And if you tell him there's a way it's supposed to be done, he'll do the opposite. And it's one of the things I love most about him. And it really rubs off on all of us. The print shop, that said, is it has similar core values 100%, but also just so much hard work and big machinery and expertise. And yet also most of the people there are just figuring out for themselves as well, and like really, really quickly getting the hang of things like letterpress and carving into masonite and using a bunch of different hands to embed the print and make the beautiful image. So it's really cool seeing a lot of these beautiful, wonderful old women in the community who are coming by just like decades later. They've been coming for years to make the really, really big prints, like everyone working together, instead of like, oh, they're a professional artist coming in who like will crank it out and it's like a conveyor belt line. It's very human and it's very communal. Being in the print shop really feels like a space for telling stories and learning from each other's wisdom. And there's not a haughtiness to it in so many other artistic spaces that I notice. And so yeah, it's really, really alive and fresh and has a lot of humility. So that's what that's like.
That's amazing. The print shop sounds a lot like a kitchen, like the food
Yeah.
analogies and the sharing of nourishment. It's clearly more than just words about the mission, but actually what you all do. Um, what you just touched on brings me to a question I've had since poring over a bunch of like older bread and puppet interviews. Is what's the role that like intergenerational relationships play within bread and puppet? Because I know that young people and elders, as well as everybody in between, all seem like they have their own foundational places within bread and puppet. So I just wondered if you could speak to that dynamicism.
Yeah, absolutely. The it's so intergenerational. Like I'm 25 years old, so I'm hitting the point where I've realized I'm an adult. Like I've been an adult for a while, but I'm hitting the point where I'm like, oh wow, like my 73-year-old colleague is my friend, like my dear
Yeah.
friend, and someone who I'm like collaborating with as an equal. And I'm actually one of the younger members, which is why I'm saying that. I think for everyone else, that's already kind of set in stone. And for me, I'm realizing this like deep privilege of having elders around me who have the same political passion and values, which is not something I think a lot of people share. Maybe, the generational gap often creates also a political gap that's really can feel really insurmountable. And there's something about being with these people who have been advocating for these things with consistency and with heart and not becoming jaded for decades and decades. And they're still doing it. And now I'm here and I'm passionate too. And I don't have to explain to them why they should be passionate. They're teaching me so much, so graciously. And they're so available to offer wisdom and also a firm hand sometimes, and often a lot of compassion and sense of humor about how hard the job can be. And so yeah, it's like even today we had an issue come up with some censorship where we may not be able to do one of our gigs because of talking about Gaza. And we called John Bell, our older colleague who's the head of the board, and we asked him for advice. And it was so nice to get someone on the phone in seconds who could help you out and know what to do next to keep your integrity, but also be flexible, like all these kinds of things, questions that I'm still learning how to answer and learning how to navigate. And he's there to do that. And that's like such a blessing. So yeah, all the time there are people of all ages. The apprenticeship programs, which are like so cool and so special. And I feel so lucky that people apply. There can be 80-year-olds and there can be 19-year-olds applying, and everyone's working together for some reason on garbage in the middle of nowhere. And somehow they all got there. And it's like the coolest thing in the whole world. even the little kids who come are like the best performers I've ever seen. Like, I mean, children are obviously the heart of art. They have a connection to it that we all once had, and then we kind of move away from it. We have to find it again, I feel like, and they've already got it. So having both children and octogenarians around who all have really cool ideas all about the same thing, I mean, yeah, it's a pretty good life. So I'm enjoying it a lot.
That's so beautiful. It reminds me of a Miriam Makaba quote where she simply reminds us that hope is a discipline, and to hear about um, particularly the folks in your group who have been at it for decades and who you're saying come back year after year and are seeing all of these different generations of breadsters and puppeteers. It sounds like, you really have some beautiful beacons and examples of what that discipline looks like and what showing up time and time again within your art looks like. Um, that quote was presented to me this past weekend at a municipal organizers for ceasefire meeting that I attended. And you just mentioned Gaza a couple of times. And when you were sharing the foundations of Bread and Puppet, you mentioned it becoming enormous around the Vietnam War. I wonder if you are, yeah, what is Bread and Puppet doing right now? What have you all been doing since October around activating for an end to the occupation of Palestine?
Yeah, it's been a lot of protest work that we have participated in and really can't take credit for because there have been so many organizers who have done the brunt work of getting, the actual protest or sit-in or rally or whatever it may be off the ground. And then we have the privilege of building these big puppets and bringing them and having people who want to hold them and want to wave them and want to shout with us. And that is wonderful, especially because we are connected to so many people, which is the honor of Bread and Puppet. So many people have come through, and yet we're also up in the mountains of Glover, Vermont. Like there's a bit of disconnect geographically sometimes from larger groups of people, and so getting to go down to DC and getting to go down to New York and getting to plug in with big large scale puppets that you need people, you need movement, you need so many different hands on it at one time. For it to flap at all, 2 people need to be in sync, 3 people, 5 people, 6 people. So it's a lot of the work has been protest work. We've done a couple of shows in TNC, the Theater for the New City, in Manhattan in the Lower East Side. We did the Emergency Gaza Mass, which we are still doing iterations of. It is a perpetually evolving show. And I think that's also what I like about Bread and Puppet is when other theater companies require time, it almost seems like they're able to make, and this isn't a critique, it's also an appreciation, but it's slightly different. They're able to make work only after something happens because they've perfected the story they want to tell about it, and it's a reflection and it's a homage. And Peter says, no, we need to do it now. I don't quite know everything I feel yet. I don't know every single point. I don't have a foolproof, flawless perspective that will encapsulate every single thing, but we need to make art. You have to make art anyway. You have to do it, and then you have to change it, and then you have to learn. You can't wait. You can't let it just simmer forever until you have the perfect piece. So that's what the work in the Theater for the New City was. It was a couple puppeteers and Peter making a show fairly quickly and performing it with a bunch of volunteers, and then it changing every single night. Because also the statistics change and the horror builds up every single second. So it was that kind of work where it's fast-paced street theater turned into indoor theater for that particular gig, and then kept that street theater for protests. Now we're doing shows in our ballroom in Glover, that same kind of mass. By mass, I mean that we build off of kind of the imagery and ritual of like a religious mass with no element of actual religion. It just offers a framework for performance that is collaborative and communal. Instead of like a transactional show, it's like we are a congregation of people gathering to tell this story and interact about it. That's why we call it a mass, because it kind of creates more of a collaborative feeling. So that's what's happening right now. We were going to take this show to Texas. I hope that can still be possible. Obviously, with what happened with the shooting, things are incredibly tense, and we want to still do our work without apology or without being censored, and we want to bring what we have, and we're going to find a way. But yeah, that's what we've been up to right now.
And is the mass in Vermont, this Vermont iteration, is that something audiences are still able to come to, or are there places where it's been published online?
Yeah, people are absolutely still welcome to come. Yeah, we have people from local Orleans County, Vermont, who come. You know, it's not as large audiences as Manhattan or even Burlington, where we also did a protest and a show, but people are coming. The volunteer rehearsals are every single time. Volunteers are welcome to jump into the show. We teach them a couple hours before. Again, very slapdash. It'll never be a perfect piece. And that's kind of what we love about it. So that's still happening every single Sunday at 3 p.m. We have a show, and at 1 p.m. we have the volunteer rehearsal, and then we all have tea. And you can also watch it online. You know, I think there's a YouTube channel for Bread and Puppet that has the masses and fairly recent ones on there, but it's also ever evolving. So if one is ever able to see it, I recommend it. But yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for that invitation. As far as when activating quickly is necessary or desired or both, between getting people together within a short frame of time and finding space, as you mentioned, there are organizers creating the space for action right now as far as advocating for Palestine is concerned. What do you do when there isn't a space already designated? What do you do when these timelines are short? What does it look like to get people together?
Well, it's called the Parking Lot Dance Company, and it's something that Peter Schumann invented that he's incredibly passionate about, that has a little bit of pushback from puppeteers because it's not always the sexiest gig, but it means that you put a bunch of puppets into the back of a van and you go to your nearest parking lot, and then you invite people from the parking lot to join you in a series of kind of abstract dance shows about a topic. Maybe with less abstraction, maybe with more direct points, often with a lot of abstraction. And it's a way of forcing art into the world where people don't always expect to see art, as you were saying, and how in a way where some institutions maybe would prefer that there was not political art happening, but you do it anyway. And that's what parking lot shows are. They're like pickup pieces where you can throw down your set, perform it really fast, and then pick it up and say good day and walk away. And that's what happens when there's like no organization and a big rush and you have to get to it. Other than that, there's still, you know, initiatives that can be formed in like 2 days with like the local groups that we work with, or just local artists that pop up over the course of 2 days. I'm always impressed by how quickly it can happen. But when it's immediacy, it's that parking lot dance style, which I actually really adore, and I wish that more people felt empowered to do, because in Peter's understanding of the world, that's what life was. That's what a cantastoria is, the form of art we so often do. Canta being sing and storia being story. It's people would get up on park benches with big canvases that they'd painted with their family, and they would tell a story for money or for to be politically heard. You know, it was such an impactful form of street theater that any civilian could do that, you know, the Nazis outlawed it. You know, it became so powerful, even though it seemed so small at first or so underestimatable. So he's kind of building off of his understanding, his childhood understanding of how to get your voice into the world. And that's what those are. So we do that fairly often, I'd say.
That's incredible. And what do you do in a modern context if there are attempts to shut down what you're doing? If, you know, if these contasoras, is that the word? They have this
Cantastoria, yeah.
contastoria. They have, it sounds like they have this history of maybe being light or innocent on the surface and like, oh, I've got a story to tell you. And then for one who pays attention and is afraid of the tide changing, it's vilified. So do you all deal with suppression of your message? And now in the times we're living in, there's obviously a lot of censorship on social media. Have you, in your experience with Bread and Puppet, ever seen a moment where suddenly we seem to be shadow banned, or, you know, our message isn't getting out there, or we're at an event that we prepared for and it's shut down before we can even get into it?
Yeah, we've absolutely faced events being shut down unexpectedly. I haven't been there for the ones where that's happened, but I've heard about it. I mean, what happened with most recently with Texas, we may not be able to perform at certain universities, which is, really sad. They'd want us to change the entire show or omit Gaza entirely, which we are not willing to do. But we still want to work with these students. We want to find a way to finesse it and to strategize, because oftentimes it is the funders who do not want the work, not necessarily all of the students, and you want the opportunity for discussion and for creation, even if there is dissent and disagreements. You want to still go. So that has happened for sure when it comes to shows and workshops. With social media, I'm the one who does the social media, and I've not noticed a lot of shadow banning, and I've been surprised by that. You'd think we would be shadow banned.
Right.
Overall, I mean, lots of negative response, but I think that that's actually probably healthy and a sign that it matters. And if people aren't angry at us, I would almost feel like perhaps we're doing something wrong because we're saying something that matters and something that clearly there's a lot of rage and hurt about. And so I'm glad that people are talking. But when it comes to being shadow banned, I haven't seen it, at least for us. And I know it's happened for so many. So I can't really say why. But yeah, there's been times on the road where we've been told to move along, and we've been scolded, and we've been even threatened. And I think the good thing about puppetry and the powerful thing about puppetry is, blame it on the puppet. That's why the puppet's there. There was a great quote from a matriarch of Bread and Puppet, Linda Elbow, after a bunch of bread and puppeteers were, I believe, arrested or potentially about to be arrested. There was, rumor that they may be arrested. And Linda was like, I guess puppets are illegal. Like, they're arresting all of our puppets. Now we have to pay all the bail for our puppets. And like, oh gosh. And it's a way of kind of tricking people into thinking that the work you're doing is inconsequential or silly or whimsical. Because a puppet, it can be seen, underestimated so strategically in order to tell a very poignant and strong narrative. And that's what is so fun about it sometimes and helpful. So yeah, when in doubt, suddenly something that was a creature and was on your body and you were using your limbs to make it alive, it's now just a utilitarian object by your side, and you say good day and you walk away, and then you pop up somewhere else and you do it again and you don't let anyone stop you. So that's how it works.
I would love to have a quick rewind to maybe one of the more expositional questions.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you? How did you get involved in Bread and Puppet? Were you a puppeteer before all of this started? Yeah, what's your deal, May?
Oh, my deal. Well, I didn't really do theater. I'm not a very good actor at all. I'm fairly shy, but I really love people. I love printmaking. I love paper making. I love building sculptural objects, and I love dancing, and I love moving. And so it was nice because Bread and Puppet is anti-theater in my understanding. I won't quote the theater as necessarily using that term, but to me it feels like it takes apart what you think theater's supposed to be, which opens up a door for any kind of human to be a part of it. So I'm just a guy, and I found Bread and Puppet from walking down the street one day and hearing really just the worst brass band I'd ever heard coming out of a decrepit windowless church in Baltimore. And I went inside, and there was a brass band, I suppose on purpose, playing really badly, and then a singer singing gorgeously, and then the brass band responding like they were in an operatic love song with each other. And I was like so tickled and moved. And at the end of the performance, after sitting cross-legged in this like weird space and not really knowing where I was or how I got there, I asked one of the puppeteers, "Hi, how do I do this for the rest of my life?" And she said, "Write me a letter." And I wrote them a letter, and I have been here ever since. So now I live here, and this is my career, and this is my life, and I'm very, very glad that that happened. But overall, I wouldn't have called myself a puppeteer before being here. I would have called myself an artist, I suppose. I'm a painter, and I'm a drawer, and I'm a sculptor and printmaker and those kinds of things, and a musician. But only being here and wiggling cardboard has made me a puppeteer. And now I will forever be a puppeteer. So
That's incredible. What's the scale of the puppets? Because obviously there are these gigantic ones, which, for anyone who hasn't seen them, relatively speaking, like, I feel like they're as big as cars or something. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's okay.
what would you say the scale of puppet is?
I mean, there are puppets that are as tall as a building. And when I say a building, I mean like a medium-sized barn. I'm not saying, like super tall, but like tall, tall. I'm pretty bad with orders of magnitude and height and width, but very, very, so maybe five of me. I don't know. I'm
I
five
love
eight.
that. Okay.
Yeah. And the small ones are small, tiny. We work with these faux gods in our mass, which can be gods of literally anything. It's not like a denominational thing. It's like it could be the god of cats. It could be the god of water, god of food, god of shelter. God of anything. They're about my palm sized is the smallest one.
Wow.
And we'll sometimes do a tabletop show, which will include a small paper mache puppet that we move to tell a story, and then tiny little characters. Or often Peter doesn't like things that are too literal. Like if we're telling a story about, oh, the puppet's mom died, you take a piece of cloth and you drop the piece of cloth. And that's the way of saying that she passed away. You don't show another puppet limping along and then leaning over and sleeping. You don't show that. So a lot of the work is also just using objects to like tell the story creatively. Peter will grab a broom and start to like wiggle it wildly or put it on top of his head. And that's the way that he dances. That's the way that he does puppetry. For him, puppetry is basically object interaction, in my understanding and in my observing. So yeah, the puppets are really cool. I mean, we work in our clay yard all together on these huge, huge creations, and Peter will mold the clay, and then we'll paper mache over it, like 40 hands on one puppet for hours and hours, many layers, and it'll dry in the sun. You'll cover it when it rains, you'll take care of it, and then you take it off of its molds, and you attach it to long poles, these found poles, whether they're, you know, fallen trees from the woods or bamboo you found on tour that you harvested and put to the top of your van and took back to Glover, Vermont. You'll attach them to these poles so that they can be really tall. And then you may add, say, fabric strands that will be counter tension so people can spin them or have them lean. Or it will look like her arms and her legs or, so forth. And then they become massive. And all of a sudden they're like a living, breathing organism. And each organism, when they're large, requires so many of us. It really feels like we are one body. And it stops being about you and it becomes about the work and what you're talking about and what matters. And that to me is incredibly freeing as someone who could never really go on stage as like a character and be me and speak lines and everyone look at me. It's not about that, and it's about the puppet, and that's the coolest part.
That is cool. As far as being anti-theater is concerned, um, it sounds like it's not only like the mechanisms that y'all are working with and right, these abstractions of the ways you're telling story, but you all are also very anti-theater in that it sounds like a very anti-racist effort. And I think at least American theater does lead back to a lot of racism a lot of the time in terms of who is allowed in, what stories we're hearing be told. Um, can you talk a bit more about those aspects of being anti-theater, sort of like scrutinizing the elitism, scrutinizing the white supremacy, scrutinizing the like blind patriotism that often comes with a lot of
Yeah,
theater?
absolutely. I mean, I think that question is always such a good one, and I always wish that I had 40 voices with me because everyone here would have such a different take and probably with a similar vein running through it, but just so many more perspectives. I mean, I love how averse Peter is to anyone paying for the theater, first off, because it should be shared with everyone. And it's not something that is like we've provided a service built off of the stories of people who are perhaps in way more squalor and trauma than we've faced. And so we're presenting you a very compelling tale, except we're all white. And now you're going to pay us $500 for it, which I feel like is so often what happens. And Peter's averse to, 100% of that start to finish. And it's been incredibly consistent, which is the consistencies really affirming to see that it's possible to have a theater that has longevity and that maintains reasonable values. I mean, obviously more than reasonable, what is necessary, what is ethical, and what is true, and what is honest, but also what should just be the fucking status quo and is not. And so I admire that consistency a lot. That said, we are an often predominantly white company, and that's something that we do think about. We also don't overthink about it, because we could sit around and talk about the fact that we're a predominantly white company, and critique ourselves, and we do that to an extent. But then it's also like, okay, but let's still do the work. Let's still do the work that we believe in, and let's still make art, and let's reach out to the people that we love and trust and can learn from. And we are here, and we want to be here, and we'll do our best with what we've got, with the understanding that we don't know everything, but that we've got bodies. We've got bodies who can do some labor right now, and that can like show up to this protest and be inside of the puppet doing the work to care about the mission. So it's wonderful to hear that people can see the anti-racism within Bread and Puppet that's existed all this time. It's also like something I don't want to pat our backs too much as like, oh, we're the perfect institution, because I think we also have a long way to go and a lot to learn. I'm sure there's subtleties within it. Any communal living space also requires people to confront within themselves their own white supremacy and their own ableism and their own all of these things. And that's one thing I love about being here, is it's not just a place of work. It's a place where we depend on each other, and it's a place where we have to, in a way, critique each other and also love each other, even when it's tricky. I think that accountability to each other as people living together and growing food together and breaking bread together and building fires to stay warm because it's negative 20 degrees and you don't have a heater together, and all of these things. You're doing it with people from all over the world. The company is not predominantly American ever since I've been here. I can't speak for every other year, but it's people from many countries, people from Chile, people from El Salvador, people from all over are the resident company, or the people who run the show. And that diversity of perspective and the requirement to know each other very intimately before we make the work makes the space feel very, very, very compassionate and very, that in essence, I think is anti the kind of humanless, cold, exploitative nature of normal theater that I've at least witnessed in some spaces. But I wish I had more people, who could give you even more of an answer. But for me, that's my experience.
Yeah, I think this won't be the last Martian radio show. So
Thank
perhaps
gosh
there's
for that. Yeah, obviously.
other future mergers, bigger communities around us. Speaking of community, you just mentioned the resident theater company. That's what you're a part of, May? And
Yeah.
can you speak more to what the resident theater company is?
Yeah, absolutely. We are 5 people right now who are responsible for inspiring and being inspired by Peter and carrying out all of the tasks that he wants us to do, whether it be the book making, like he makes these tiny chapbooks that inform the circus acts as well as the overarching shows. So we edit those books, we cut and paste them, and we turn them into like really mass handoutable media. They're called anti-capitalist chapbook sales. It's like one you get for half a buck, two a quarter for good luck, and if you need a total of 3, hallelujah, 3 are free. So it's like a big enterprise of like printing and cutting all together, because he makes like 100 a day, only to have them go for free, which is kind of also a beautiful image. So whether it's that kind of task, or it can be photographing his bed sheets and cataloging them, these paintings that he makes, just thousands and thousands of paintings, and working in the archive, and making sure everything's organized and remembered and honored. Or it's going to the print shop and helping make a bunch of prints for a specific scene that Peter's interested in doing, where maybe those prints will turn into banners that can move as like a collective piece on stage with loads of bodies. Or it's, running a rehearsal with 20 volunteers who we found just off of social media who want to jump into a protest, but they've never ever held a puppet before. And so it's last minute organizing the space for that, making sure there's a fire, making sure everyone knows what to do, making sure that they have white clothes that fit them, making sure they don't get hurt, making sure they know what the movement is, that kind of stuff. Or just all of the coordination of how will our summer apprenticeships look? How can we make them more accessible and open to all sorts of people? How can we make them feel the most fulfilling for artists, because people do pay for them? It's a way that helps the theater stay on its feet. How can we make it feel like the most exciting and uplifting experience for them? All of these different considerations are on the resident company. and it's tiring and it's really, really rewarding and special. So yeah.
As far as the apprenticeship program is concerned and the fact that there is a cost to participate, I noticed that on your website. I also noticed there is an opportunity to secure, I don't know if the word is scholarship, but there are opportunities to find free or more personalized ways into that apprenticeship program.
Absolutely. That's one thing I love about it. When I had to be, when I, or not had to be, when I was applying for an apprenticeship and I worried that I'd have to pay a fee I could not quite afford, I reached out and they waived it. It's like an almost immediate waiving. The
Wow.
goal is, okay, the theater does need to survive. We do not pay for our shows. Or sorry, we do not,
Charge.
charge for our shows.
Mhm.
There are so many things that we keep money completely out of the picture. How can we actually stay on our feet so we can at least even provide the service of having people get to come and work in a print shop and work in a political theater with no backgrounds, which is something everyone should get to do. But how do we stay alive? And so the apprenticeship program is kind of one of the main foundations of that. But even so, it's almost an immediate yes anytime someone requires any financial support for it. We never want that to be a hindrance, which meant a lot to me. So that's still occurring, and that's still very much the case. Anytime someone writes a letter, if they clarify, I cannot afford this, I really want to be here. Even I can afford a third of this. Anything, like it's completely considered, and 99% of the time we're able to meet the need. So that's a real blessing.
That is beautiful. And you are currently on the Bread and Puppet property? Is this like a room within? Can you talk about where you are? Your
Yeah,
room within
in
a
my room.
home and just those dynamics and what the artistic spaces on the grounds look like.
Yeah, I'm in my bedroom, which is in the puppeteer's house. The puppeteer's house is an old converted barn farmhouse. It is 2 stories, and five puppeteers live in there right now. One lovely star volunteer who's staying with us. And then there's another house down the road where one of the other puppeteers lives with their beautiful big dog. Uh, and then Peter lives up the hill at his house, and you can just walk right up there, go all the time for tea or to go to his studio and pick up the bedsheet paintings. And then there's the converted barn print shop right there out my window. And behind me is the Puppet Museum, which was an old cattle barn that's huge and was turned into a multi-story, uber colorful, raucous celebration of Peter's work. And there's so many huge puppets in there. There's loads of other buildings on the property that are either storage or performance space. But yeah, it's a really wacky and delightful place to live. I never thought I'd get here, so this is cool.
It sounds cool and wacky and delightful. When is the museum open?
Museum is open 24/7. We just
Oh,
request. I mean, I think if it's dark, we prefer. It's kind of like dawn till dark. But I've seen people around 10 p.m. and I haven't told them to leave. It's just up to people to turn on and off the lights. We want the lights also to be turned off. A lot is the issue. We don't want them on all night and wasting electricity. So it's just closing it for yourself, opening it for yourself, making sure the door's locked. But really, anyone can come anytime. Doesn't cost money. There's a press shop there where you can put money in a box if you want some of the art, and then some of the art is like free, cheap art or $1. So it's cool.
that is cool. As far as electricity and the bills and also being kind to our planet and our land, how do you find um what are you all doing over there? You've mentioned a few things throughout the interview, growing your own food, finding materials and treasuring trash, keeping the
Yeah.
lights off when they don't need to be on.
Yeah.
Where does, yeah, eco-consciousness come into play for Bread and Puppet?
Yeah, that's true. I feel like the eco-consciousness element is something that really drew me to it when it comes to being in line with, I don't know, all the forms of ethics that I care about. Like when I was an apprentice and a volunteer, it's all about using these outhouses, which, the outhouses are really fun and cool. Like they were really well built and they're decorated with so much care. And you just, pour sawdust at the end, and then people are actually responsible for shoveling, like the poop. And so it's actually really kind of cool and empowering to be like an apprentice and coming from a city and be like, oh, one of the jobs today is to scoop poop with 3 strangers. Like that's just part of it. That's part of being alive. And to me, that was really cool. It's like, yeah, duh. Like, why should I
Mhm.
be so dissociated from, my basic bodily function. Like, why should I be dissociated from where my food comes? Why should I be dissociated from like where my water comes from? Like, that's weird. I've been told that that's weird. Like, I've been told that that's not weird, but it is weird. So yeah, there's the outhouse culture, not using so much water for the toilet or shower. We really like kind of say like, all right, you can take one shower a week when you're an apprentice, or you can take these lovely outdoor showers and our solar shower. So it's not like anyone's suffering. It's just a little more uncomfortable than what you're used to. But really quite fun to get to experiment with that style of living. We grow our own food in a beautiful communal garden that Estelle Kitchen, one of our incredible puppeteers, she's kind of the bottom liner for that garden, and it yields so much beautiful food through so much hard work and tending and care and pre-planning, and everyone participates in that cultivation. The meals, oh my God, that's a part that to me is so special. Like, I love making somehow with, obviously we have a beautiful garden, we're very lucky, but there's a certain amount of limited resource happening where you have to work with what you've got. You know, you're not just going to the grocery store and getting your whatever. Making something super creative for like hundreds of people every night in the summers, because we get so many people around, whether it's community members, staff, apprentices, local family members, guests, etc., making these beautiful meals just with things we've grown and found around or have been very generously donated to us by some different groups that we work with and collaborate with. That part feels really exciting. Getting to eat outside every night with everyone, and this spread, that feels very, very much like a blessing. So yeah.
As far as you've mentioned this Texas journey a few times, what is next for the resident company? Should Texas happen, what's that going to look like? And if, you know, let's just stay in that reality. What is this Texas show about to look like for y'all?
Well, I'll say what I hope it looks like, because I can't know for sure. I hope that it looks like doing a consistorio workshop with students in San Antonio, and to incorporate Gaza and not feel like we have to be completely silent about that issue. And so a consistorio workshop involves taking discarded bed sheets and making images on those bed sheets, and then putting physical actions with your body and narration with them, and flipping each panel over and over like a large comic. And it's made to be performed on the street. So you make that from scratch with the students about whatever issue they are passionate about, whether it be the environment or immigration or whatever applies to them. And I would hope that a lot of those consistorios could end up being centered about Gaza. And to present one, maybe to present our own ideas, not to try to force that, but to say that's what we're currently working on. I hope that happens. Like, I want to work. Every time I say that we're going to Texas, there's like a, you know, someone I'm talking to, not part of Bread and Puppet, just someone I'm talking to who's like, oh man, I wonder how they'll take your politics. And part of me is like, I don't know, like there are so many people in Texas. Like there's got to be like also so many beautiful organizers in Texas doing really hard work. Like I don't want to assume anything. I've never been myself, but like, I don't know. Why wouldn't we want to perform in Texas? Also, I don't always want to perform or work with people who already agree with me. That would be incredibly boring and kind of depressing, like, and maybe not the point. So I really hope that can happen. I think we're gonna make it happen no matter what. It'll just require more cleverness. I hope that we can perform in Austin or in Houston somehow, and present the emergency Gaza Mass the way that it was made. With the understanding that perhaps there will be dissent, and that is okay and that is necessary. But we really deeply believe in this show and we want to bring it. So yeah, I hope that can happen. After that, we will have a spring tour where we'll go through the Northeast Kingdom and Massachusetts, and I think the southmost we go is Brooklyn. I may be wrong about that, but that's a standard time that we'll do another tour. And we plan on presenting something that may be a mix of a mass, I say in quotes, like what I described earlier, or a circus, maybe even a merging of those concepts. And I can assure you it will also be about Gaza. So yeah, and perhaps other things as well. But that's what's up for us. Then it's just preparing for the summer and the apprenticeships and the shows that we'll be having on the farm that we hope people will come and join in on and break bread with us. I haven't talked enough about bread so far. I've talked a lot about puppets, but yeah, I really hope that can happen.
take us out with bread. Let's
Oh, the bread. Oh, man.
yeah, talk about the bread.
Oh, the bread. Well, it's really good. Uh, It's made with an 160, I believe, maybe 180, but 160-year-old sourdough starter that Peter Schumann has been tending to and keeping alive. Not exclusively him, because he's not 160 years old, but it's something that was been in his family, and he makes sourdough from it. And it can create mixed loaves or even pumpernickel with sourdough. And he makes them in these large, large bread ovens that he's built himself or with support from other puppeteers and local community members. And they are meant to be hard to chew because things that are important should not always be easy. And food should not be just like Wonder Bread where it melts in your mouth and it disappears and it's not an experience. It should be an active dance between your teeth and the thing. Peter's very passionate about that. It's really yummy, and we have it with our garlic aioli, which is strong and sharp and delicious, just like how art should be strong and sharp and delicious a lot of the time. And we give it out at every single show, and that's one of the most special possible moments of the show. And we make it in a mortar and pestle, that aioli, just from scratch ourselves. And there's always the sound of like an old baseball bat squashing garlic during every single moment of the day. I feel like in the summer, there's always aioli being made. And yeah, so that's one of kind of the central pillars and glues that bring us all together is the love of bread and the love of garlic and the love of sharing it. So there will certainly be a lot of bread.
Well, may everyone continue to be fed your bread and presented with your puppets. May everyone in Gaza get the bread that they need as swiftly as possible.
Everyone in Gaza get the bread they need. My gosh, yes.
Thank you so much, May. You're so appreciated. And we'll all be staying tuned to what you and the good people at Bread and Puppet are up to.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. Free Palestine. Appreciate you.
Free Palestine.